If I go back 15 years ago, what I thought was leadership was micromanaging people. Some people think there's circumstances in your life that causes you to be an entrepreneur, but it's just always been an ambition. If you think you're right for it and you're ambitious enough, go for it.
Hello and welcome to Career Conversations, a podcast from Vera Search, where we speak with senior leaders, business owners and CEOs about the decisions that have shaped their careers and get insights into leadership. In this episode, I'm joined by Dominic Kearns, founder and CEO of Fibrus. Dominic is a serial entrepreneur who has built a number of telecommunications businesses, from launching his first startup in 2012 to leading Fibrus, a fibre broadband provider focused on delivering high-speed, full fibre connectivity to rural communities across Northern Ireland and the UK. Dominic is also chair of B4B Group, Weave and Fibre Optics, giving him a unique perspective on leading and scaling multiple businesses at different stages of growth. In our conversation today, we will explore Dominic's career journey, the realities of scaling a business at pace, his perspective on leadership, and building high-performing teams. Dominic, thank you for joining me this morning.
I suppose before we dive into Fibrus and the wider group, let's go back to when you qualified from university in 2007. What did that initial journey look like when you entered the world of work?
I was telling this story recently. I had done a degree in accounting, and as soon as I came out, I was straight into a job, and fairly soon into that job thinking I could go again in terms of doing the next step on the accountancy ladder. And you know, I went to an interview. I actually met Eamon Donnelly. I don't know if you ever heard tell of the Business U Forum.
Yes. Yeah.
Based out in Toom there, and I meant to actually mention it to him, but I went for an interview in his organisation, and they brought me in to do the aptitude test and then through to the interview. And I remember the feedback from the recruiter after the interview was, "Is this guy really an accounting graduate?" Because the aptitude test was so poor. It's funny. You go through your degree and you learn about your subject, but it's only until you really get into practicing it and get a few years past you do you really get to understand what that subject is about and how you use that in every day. And see today in all the businesses, having that foundation of accountancy has been really important. You know, when you sit down with your finance director or your CFO, having the ability to know the numbers as well as he or she does has been a huge benefit. So yeah, I'm glad I done accountancy, and university was a good time.
And at what moment did you pivot away from accountancy?
Well, accountancy, I never wanted to be an accountant, believe it or not. The advice was given to me way back by an old careers teacher that I had in St. Louis and Ballymena. They always, you know, I think it's around 4th or 5th year, they sit you down and go, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I had always wanted to operate my own business, but always been fairly entrepreneurial. So her advice at that time was, well, go and do accountancy, because that'll stand to you. If you want to own and operate your own business, understanding the finances of your business is hugely beneficial. She also quoted, you know, a stat that 60% of the top CEOs in the world were from an accountancy background. So that was useful information, and I took it on board, went and done it, and got my qualifications.
Oh, and where does that entrepreneurial desire come from?
Yeah, that's a question that gets asked a lot. I don't know. Some people think there's circumstances in your life that causes you to be an entrepreneur or whatever, but I don't know. It's just always been an ambition to do something of significance, or you know, and growing your own business is very significant for someone. They feel ownership of it. It's a big part of their lives, you know. So it's always been an ambition to grow a business. I didn't expect at this time to be sitting, maybe I think we're 5 or 6 businesses in at this stage, that we've grown, and actually still most of those are operating today.
You know, then in 2012 when you set up the first business, B4B Group, what drew you towards the telecom sector?
So again, like most people in telecoms, they fall into telecoms, and once you fall into telecoms, it's very hard to get back out of it. How did I fall into telecoms? I was working for actually an investor who had just invested in a telecoms company in the south of Ireland, and he put me in there, and I was trying to get things going in LA for that business, and that didn't work out. Truth be told, he fired me because there was a bit of a disagreement on terms of what was going on. But that was the catalyst for me to go, right, well, now's my opportunity. I think I know this sector pretty well. I had a few relationships in terms of sourcing products, and then we just got going. And I had spent probably about 18 months on my own, along with a couple other colleagues. And then I met Tommy O'Hagan, who's my business partner in B4B. And we decided to get together and put the businesses together. And ever since then, we've just year on year grown that business. And it's our core business. It's our steady state business that we're very proud of and still remains there today, 15 years later.
And you said something really interesting there. You'd been fired at a time, and you were quite relaxed when you said that, quite a significant event, for someone. So, at that time, how did you feel?
Yeah, probably fired makes it sound a bit more dramatic than it was. There was absolute disagreement on what the owners of the business were trying to do. And fundamentally that, many of the other staff within the business felt that as well. So I had absolutely no problem with that. If anything, I was glad it happened because then you can move on from things, I think. And that's the thing in business around making the right decisions. Quite often, a lot of people can dither around the decision and find it uncomfortable about making the right decision. But, as soon as I was in that place, in that business, he probably was right. We parted company, because there's no point in keeping going when people are on different pages. So that being, for me, it was the right thing for both of us at that point in time. And sure, look now today, I'm glad it happened. I didn't feel any particular way when it actually happened at the time.
And when you met, your now co-founder Tommy, was there an instant connection there? And would you say that you thought in a similar way, you had similar ambitions, or were there some differences that also made that work?
Yeah, I'd say there was that instant, realization that we're fairly similar people with different skill sets and different ways how we look at things, but core fundamentally, we're both very ambitious, and putting that type of ambition together, it's not just a 2 times 2 equals 4. You get more from putting those types of people together. So yeah, it was instant. We understood what each other was about, and that probably together we were stronger rather than doing things separately. And to this day, Tommy and I we've started a few businesses together, and you'll find that actually with most of our businesses, there's always 2. There's never just one, and I like that. I think it's important that you have different skill sets with your founding teams rather than just trying to do everything yourself. Tommy's an out-and-out business development guy. He knows how to get from A to B as quick as possible. He knows how to grow businesses. So yeah, it's perfect partnership.
In a previous podcast, I met with Roger Johnson. He talked about being a visionary, and then also having an operator or an integrator within the business. Is it that kind of relationship, or would you see yourselves as both as visionaries and then you have operators within the business then around?
Yeah, I think we've probably a bit of both, but certainly if you talk about vision, it's understanding exactly where you want to go, and making sure everybody that's around you trying to help you do that is absolutely bought into that as well. And yeah, you when it comes to actually delivering it, you bring in the best people you can operationally. And most successful startups, the operational people that are involved in the business have been there and done it before, and have learned what hasn't went well and can bring that forward into startups. And I found that's worked for us.
So there are a number of businesses within the group. One of the largest is Fibrus. So for those less familiar, tell us about Fibrus and tell us about the impact it's having here in Northern Ireland and then further afield.
Yeah, so I suppose by a long shot, Fibrus has been our biggest business to date. It's the one that I'm involved in 95% of the time. I'm the CEO in the business. Fibrus, if we go back to 2018. I think we incorporated the company in 2018, but we didn't really get going until 19. There was a lot of investment coming into the telecom sector, mainly for building fibre networks. People for years thought they had fibre, but what they had was a partial fibre network, and the last drop to your home was delivered via copper. And for years, the bigger players, BT's, guys that talked about giving you fibre, but you were actually getting your service via copper. The limitations with copper were around speed and reliability. So back in 2019, there was a lot of investment flowing into the sector. We in B4B had started to build networks to business parks, areas where there was a lot of businesses, and at the same time, my co-founder in that business, Connell, he had been working for a fibre operator in the south and had left that business. And I seen he had left the business, and within a few weeks we had met up in actually the Malone Lodge in Belfast, and both chatting through how we seen things. We quickly arrived at the fact that there's a real opportunity here to do something in terms of developing an alternative fibre optic network to the likes of the Openreaches and the Virgin Medias that already existed here. So as I say, we quickly established there was an opportunity. Connell's had a history of working with investors and bringing investors into his business. I hadn't. So he had quite a contact list of people who would go out trying to pitch the business to. And we done that over a period of 2 to 3 months. And literally all we had was a slide deck and ourselves, and we went into some of these plush buildings in London looking for the investment. And we talk about it today. You tell the people that join our business, we raised 100 million commitment from a slide deck. As long as you know what you're doing and you think you can establish a team and scale the business quickly, you'll get that investment. And we're very lucky that our investors, Infra Capital, have backed us not only for that initial investment, but ever since the business, we started out to try and build to, I think it was 130,000 homes. And now we're approaching 500,000 homes, and
wow,
they've invested a further 85 million into the business. We've had 320 million of investment from 9 different lenders, and we've also won about 400 million of subsidy from the government to build fibre networks. So it's a lot of money, a lot of money going into the ground, but every penny's been needed to grow the business to where it's at today.
And it really proves the point around people buy from people.
You do, yeah.
And I know maybe for those who are seeking investment or who are listening, or startups, would there be advice that you would give if they are approaching investors? And you talk about going in with just a slide deck, but obviously you've been able to achieve something quite significant. So, what was your approach? If it wasn't a blow you away slide deck, what approach did you take to be able to come away with that investment?
You have to know it inside out. I when I say raising it from a slide deck, I jest a bit, because you really need to understand the opportunity. And I think it was a perfect alignment at the time that a lot of these pension funds they like to follow trends, and whenever the first few investments happen, all the funds come in and want to make those investments. So I think for people the ambition to get investment into a business, if they're not sure what the business is, look at where the trends are at, and where these investment funds are putting their money, and go down that avenue, and absolutely know the business that you're pitching to them before you go and see them. Having that experience, within that pitch deck we had prior to that, Richard, you'll know this happens, is we had privately spoken to a few individuals that were in organisations that if we were able to do this, would you join the business? And we had done that, so we were able to put placeholders in the senior leadership team that were in the slide deck for people that had been there and done it and were experienced. And that helps give the investors confidence that it's not just you with the idea trying to take money off them, that you actually have thought about this and you're bringing in people that have been there, done that, and can help you deliver the business plan.
And that's really interesting. We'll come back on to senior leadership teams and building that and what you look for. But early on in the journey, Fibrus would have won the contract for Project Stratum, a government-funded initiative to connect over 81,000 homes in rural areas here in Northern Ireland. Quite a significant contract to win, and in competing against some large, very well-established businesses who were already in the market. So, well, firstly, what gave you that ambition to go for such a contract so early?
Well, but back to what I said earlier, I think there is a bit of a misconception out there that Fibrus came about because of that contract. It was on our radar, but it wasn't that important to us. What we had planned to do was, as I said, build 130,000 homes in small towns and villages, completely using our own investment. But whenever the process for Stratum started, we actually said, we'll have a crack at this. And once we get into the process and started to understand it, I suppose we grew in confidence that actually we could win this, but more importantly, we could actually deliver this, because alongside that, the organisation was growing. We were recruiting hundreds of people. There was people with the expertise to deliver that type of contract coming into our business day and daily. So as it was going on, the process going on, we got more confident that we thought we knew how to win the bid. Could we develop an organisation that could deliver it? By the time the bid was going in, we knew we were going to win it, and we knew we had an organisation developed that was going to deliver the contract for the government. And we delivered that Project Stratum on time and on budget. It's our favourite saying internally. And there's not too many government contracts that you see today, particularly big infrastructure projects, that get delivered on time and within budget. And it's been a huge achievement for the organisation, and a real, I suppose, building network into some of the most remote parts of NI. There's a real lasting legacy there. There's a saying in telecoms, a lot of the ex-Virgin Media people that have joined our organisation, they would say if you cut them open, they'd bleed red, because that's their brand colour. In years to come, I hope the same is said about Fibrus. I'm not sure what you would call our colour, but bright blue or whatever, that you bleed bright blue because of the impact that the business has had on people's lives, and how they do business, and how they operate their lives.
And you mentioned there, when seeking investment, you'd already started to build out that senior leadership team, and if you were to win the contract or win the investment, there were individuals that wanted to come on the journey. And how do you first go about finding individuals who are going to match the ambition of you and your co-founders, and come into an organisation that was going to go on this really rapid growth journey?
Yeah, so telecoms is a bit of a village. The good executives that are out there, and as you go through the years, you'll always meet people. You go, maybe one day I'd like to work with that person. That person would be good in an organisation. So between Colin and I, I suppose he probably knew half of our executive team. I knew the other half, and we just went and visited them and told them what our plans were. I suppose it's like even when you're outlining what you're about to the rest of the organisation, you still have to do that with your senior team. You really have to get them to buy into it. Making sure you have the most experienced people around you was massively important, and we were able to sell the ambition and get those people on board. And obviously, once the business was developing and we were winning contracts and getting investment, then the people seen what we were saying was coming true, so they were happy enough to join.
Yeah. And are there things that you prioritise or look for, I suppose, when you're bringing in people to join that senior leadership team?
Yeah, there is a term we have within the business, but I'm not going to say it on camera. But it's all about trying to get the right fit for the business and the culture. Unfortunately, many of the type of people that we're looking for normally have 10, 15 years within a particular organisation, and they become kind of institutionalised to how that organisation works. And it's trying to find people that have that experience but don't necessarily just follow how that organisation operates. So we spent a bit of time, and 80% of the time we got it right with senior people. 20% the time we didn't. And I think in terms of, I suppose, leading the business, leading the senior leadership team, whenever it's not working too, your other leaders within the business expect you to deal with it.
Yeah.
And you know, we've had leaders that have come in and exited the business because it just wasn't working out.
And would you
it's
say
important to deal with that, you know?
And would you say on that point that, the things that maybe you have got wrong, when hiring, have been around fit, maybe more so than experience?
Absolutely. If you're programmed to come in at 9 o'clock and leave at 5, it's fine saying that you don't do that in an interview, but when it actually transpires in practice, that can become a massive issue for me, because whenever you're growing a business, it's full on. It's all about outputs driven rather than inputs. And when somebody's focusing on inputs, and their inputs is, I'm here from 9 and I leave at 5, that becomes very problematic fairly quickly. So you're trying to look for the traits in people that align to growing an ambitious business. And sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it wrong, but it's recognising that fairly quickly and dealing with it fairly quickly. And
you said there it's about measuring outputs, and I can only imagine in a high growth business, and you mentioned this as we met this morning, there's lots of deadlines and they're continuous, and you're constantly trying to meet them. So is that a strategy, or is that an approach that you take, is to measure those outcomes and keep accountability within the business?
Yeah, I think, well, in my early stages of my businesses, if you even go back maybe 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought about it that way. But definitely, as the more experience you get, you actually realise the inputs aren't important. It's all about the outputs. And if you're very clear with the organisation and people what you expect of them, then let them do that. Let them get on with it and delivering those outputs. Going back to the early days of Fibrus, every day was a deadline, because every day there was something really important that needed done and finished. Now the business is a bit more steady state. We're fixated at the end of the month rather than the end of the next day. Yeah, I think if you can develop that culture of delivering to outputs, that can be fairly effective in getting the whole organisation to move in that direction, rather than just focusing on, I have to be at my desk 9 to 5.
Yeah. Obviously, you need those inputs to get the output, and I'm sure there have been times where you've got teams there putting in a huge amount of work, and they're maybe not getting the outcome that they want or that they can see as possible. So what's your approach at that stage where you're close but you're not quite there, and the input you can see is going in to try and get you to where you want to be?
Yeah, so I find sometimes outputs get missed because people overcomplicate things. I like to bring things back to basics sometimes. Sometimes the answer's in the basics. But look, you're not always going to deliver projects on time, on budget. I talked about earlier with Stratum. We knew what we were doing, and we were lucky to get that project delivered. But you're not always going to get things done on time within budget. You have to recognise that, and people, they're humans at the end of the day. They're not always going to deliver all of the time. As long as you recognise that, majority of the time they will, as long as you're guiding them in the right way.
And what have been some of the toughest decisions then that you've had to take, I suppose, as Fibrus and the wider group has grown?
Yeah, decisions. Well, I suppose the biggest decision any leader would have to make is around decisions that impact the people that are in that organisation. And what I mean by that is like the process of right-sizing organisations depending on where the business is at that particular time. It's a difficult time when you have to do that. We were hell for leather for a few years, bringing in that investment, getting the network built. But then as that started to slow down, you had to right-size the organisation to make sure that you were moving into a period where you're going to be more sustainable. So that's probably the biggest challenge that you have in terms of making the decision to do that to the organisation. But again, it's the right thing to do. The way I look at processes where where you're trying to reduce the size of your organisation and ultimately having to let people go is if you have 50 people and you have to let 10 go, you're doing that for the other 40 people. To make the business more sustainable, you have to think about everybody, you know. So that's probably the toughest decision you have when you're leading a business is making decisions that affect people.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you've looked at that there, you know, because probably one of the most difficult things, you know, to go through is redundancies or, you know, downsizing of a business. And yeah, there are people at the end of those processes. But interesting what you say there, just about if you've got 50, you've got to think about, you know, the 40 that are able to stay, and for the business to be sustainable long term.
Yeah.
So thinking about then some defining moments that have got you then to a CEO role. I know you've always had that entrepreneurial mindset, and you know you've grown businesses significantly. But were there defining moments within that you know have got you to then where you are today as CEO of Fibrus?
Defining moments as such. The funny thing about being an entrepreneur or starting your own business is you find yourself in the position of CEO rather than wanting to be in that position. If you understand what I mean, you know, you'll have plenty of people that grow into that position through an organisation, whereas if you're starting a business, the buck stops with you. So that's kind of, I found myself in this position rather than ever wanting to be in it. You know, you used the term there earlier on, career. Like I've never thought about a career or having a career, you know, and that just comes with being entrepreneurial, I suppose. You just, whatever you want to do, you get involved, you get stuck in. It doesn't really matter about the title, but I suppose when you're founding a business, bringing in investment, and that responsibility just all falls on top of you, and you have to lead from the front and take it on head on. And I quite enjoy it. You know, a lot of people will do courses and leadership courses and develop themselves through organisations. I think learning on the job's every bit as good. I've made plenty of mistakes. How I approach leadership today is absolutely completely different than how I approached leadership at the start. It's absolutely the opposite, to be quite honest. And I was only able to do that by learning the job.
I was going to ask, and did the responsibility, you know, of being a CEO or, you know, a senior leader within the business come to you naturally?
Yeah, it has. I think it's always been in me to be able to lead and direct an organisation. Don't ask me where it comes from, but it's there. I get a great sense of satisfaction when seeing the people within the organisation absolutely buy into it. I suppose once you start to see that, then you can develop that further yourself in terms of, right, how do I take this to the next stage? How do I make sure people are not bought in the short term, but bought in the long term? So yeah, I'd say it's something that I think's in you naturally. I think it's probably difficult to develop in people. It's either in you or it's not, I think.
And you said there, like, there's different ways that you can develop them personally and develop your leadership style and ability, whether that's courses. But you mentioned there that working on the job, you know, is just as important. Has that been extremely valuable for you?
Yeah, like if I go back 15 years ago, what I thought was leadership was micromanaging people, being over all the detail, you know, having an opinion on everything.
Okay.
That the organisation would survive or fail based on everything that I do. Whereas only, you know, having that experience of leading organisations over the last 15 years, do you realise that's the complete opposite. Losing control of the business to let the business flourish is about, you know, giving people their responsibilities and getting the right people in place, giving them their responsibilities and letting them get on with it. Step back, let them deliver the business for you. And that's definitely what I've learned over the last 15 years is what you think is the right approach to leading a business at the start of your journey is actually probably the opposite when you get further down the line, more experience.
And that can sometimes be easier said than done, particularly when you've founded a business, you've been over all the detail, you've been involved in it all, and almost letting some of that go. and having the trust that the person then who's picking it up is going to deliver. So how have you approached that, and how have you been able to do that then in recent years?
Once you change that style, you can see actually things get done a lot quicker. Okay. If you're sitting in the office trying to direct people all day rather than give them direction and let them get on with it, things will naturally get done quicker. So recognizing that as a way that things are going to work well, and just letting them get on with it is how I've been able to say to myself, well, this is working.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes, leaders might worry that it'll be done maybe differently, which in their eyes, they then worry about the quality, So again, how have you approached that, particularly when you're hopefully getting to the right result and the same result that you would have been able to deliver, but it's just being done in a different way? It's
recognising you can't change people's personalities, but you can change their behaviours, and trying to get the behaviours of your senior leaders to align with what the business is about. And it's back to that ambition point. If you can make sure that ambition is instilled in everybody, then everybody's ultimately going in the right direction.
When you're then working with your senior leadership team and trying to take everybody in the right direction, are there things that you do and the business does to be able to instill the right culture, ensure you're all moving forward in the right direction in terms of strategy, but also allowing then those senior leaders to be the right leaders for their teams in below?
Yeah, like culture is a massive thing within any organisation. If you look at the beginning of Fibrus, our biggest department within Fibrus at the start was the people and culture team, because we knew how important that was going to be. Like at the start of Fibrus, we had no like intellectual property, we had no secret sauce, we had no special technology. What we were doing was trying to deliver infrastructure that other people were doing, and ultimately it was going to be the people that delivered that. So quickly we established that the people within the organisation were going to be the critical element. So we established our people and culture team, and that team sits alongside all of our colleagues. I talk about 60% of the daylight hours of anybody's life is spent in their work.
Yeah.
So you have a huge responsibility to those people to make sure that they're content in their in work and that they're well looked after. So we have a big people and culture team that constantly is making sure the organisation is happy, and we're surveying and we're finding out what's going well for people, what's not. Having that communication, having social events, developing that culture where you feel you're all together when you're delivering something rather than everybody off in their silos and doing their own thing.
And coming back to your point earlier about Downroll Racecourse, and having team days, you mentioned that wider family was involved in that.
Yeah.
How important is that to the business, and what have been some of the benefits that you've seen from doing events like that?
Yeah, well, back to what I said earlier, a lot of our colleagues are extremely proud of what Fibrus has done, and to bring, like for instance, the race day on Sunday, to be able to bring their family along and the Fibrus brand everywhere and showcasing what Fibrus is about, it's hugely important to them, and of course, like, their families are an extension of them, so it's important that they're happy as well as your colleagues are happy. So trying to give back as much as you can to the time that they dedicate to the organisation.
Well, alongside being the CEO of Fibrus, then you hold a number of chair roles amongst the wider group. You've Weave, B4B, and Fibre Optics. So how do you approach those roles differently between being a CEO and a chair?
Yeah, well, obviously light touch. Again, it's trying to instill a bit of sense of direction where we want to go, and then stepping back even further than I'd be used to. Again, those roles come about from starting those businesses and being shareholders in those businesses. So it's not something like I've never applied for a non-executive role, or I've never applied for a chair role. So it's been easy enough to perform those roles because you understand the business from the start.
Yeah.
You can bring your learning from what you've done as an executive into the boardroom table to explain to people how you've done it in the past, and whether you can give you might tell them 10 things, but if they take 2 of those out there and improves how they do things, then you're doing your job. So I like having that light touch approach with the businesses that I'm involved in, because you get more satisfaction actually of giving less advice in the business version than sitting giving advice all day long, you know.
Mm-hmm. And thinking about that, then have you learned a different way to lead, stepping into the likes of a chair or non-exec role, or what has it taught you, CEO role as well?
Yeah, I think not being in the business full time helps when you're doing those non-exec type roles or chairing a business. Having those touch points maybe only once or twice a month can give a different perspective on something, whereas your executive team, they're living in that business day in, day out, and sometimes they don't see the obvious answer.
Yeah.
So that light touch, soft touch, being there for the executive team just to bounce stuff off, I think it's enjoyable. I enjoy doing that, and there's things that I see going on in some of the other businesses that I like to bring back myself. Mm-hmm. When I see the executive team doing good things that I would like to translate across.
I'm thinking about maybe business owners that are listening, or other senior leaders. What are the advantages to them having somebody come in a chair or non-executive role? They've
heard it a million times from people advising them to bring in chairs and non-executives. I'm not going to say anything different. They absolutely should. Mm-hmm. Bringing in that different perspective on things is hugely important, because, as I say, you're working flat out on the business yourself, in the business rather than on the business a lot of the time, and that's what a non-exec can bring you. So I'd absolutely advise anyone, that particularly businesses that have ambitions to grow and be significant, that they bring in that sounding board on some of the key stuff that they're debating with themselves. Bring someone else to talk to about it, and quite often you come up with the answer together rather than on your own.
And you talked about earlier, when you were looking for individuals to come into the senior leadership team within the business, it was often those who had a proven track record in that area that you were seeking. Is that different at a non-exec level? Do you necessarily need somebody who's got a proven track record in that sector, or that or is it better or just as advantageous to have somebody who's maybe completely impartial but coming with a wealth of other experience?
Yeah, I think probably taking people from different sectors is probably beneficial, because perhaps, again, I said earlier, telecom's a bit of a village. Everybody thinks they know how to do it best, whereas I think if you bring in people from other kind of sectors, it gives a different perspective, and you can learn more from them. And then obviously the type of skill set that person brings, whether it's operational, whether it's business development, whether it's people, HR related, trying to get that right fit as well. What's going to be most beneficial to you and your board and your organisation, and finding that right person, and don't be afraid to bring them in.
So you've got a lot going on between being a CEO and the chair of some fairly well established businesses. So what do you do outside of that? How do you balance life outside of work with all that going on?
Yeah, I'm not sure I balance it that particularly well. I suppose a few years ago it would have been, especially at the beginning of Fibrus, it would have been pretty full on, and you're rely heavily on my wife to look after the out of work stuff and our kids. I talk about my other business partner as my wife. She helped with that balance at the start, but over the last number of years, as the businesses are all well established, Fibrus is as well established, you can balance things a bit better. And I was doing a talk with a group of people in the university recently, a few years back, and they asked me the exact same question, like what do you do outside of work to give you that balance and give you that other interest? And I struggled that day, to come up with an answer, but now that you've asked the question, I have an answer for you today. So there are a few other things that I like doing. I fly helicopter. I've learned to fly helicopter. Right. I've always had an interest in horse racing, as I mentioned earlier on, so I've started to own and trade a few horses as well to give me an interest outside of work. So, and you need those interests. You need to find that balance with working all the time, and you do need a life outside of work.
That's quite unique. The helicopter piece, how did you forward that?
Trying to take the toughest thing you can probably do and go and try and do it. Was always had an interest in helicopters, so I'm almost ready to be a fully qualified.
And what does that entail to become fully qualified?
Yeah, you have about 40 to 50 mandatory hours to do, 40, 50 hours of mandatory training to do, and then whatever extra your instructor needs. So I've done that now. Hopefully by the time this maybe goes out, Richard, I'll be a fully qualified of the test coming up. So I'll hopefully be doing that and get that soon. But yeah, it's something you need ambitions outside of work as well. And that, flying a helicopter is a difficult task to do. Yeah. So of course I picked the hardest.
And you're very involved with Antrim GAA and the Saffron Business Forum. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so GAA is a big part of my life, my family's life. I'm from Dunloy. It's a huge part of our community as well, particularly hurling. And I suppose when the GAA is in you have your club and you have your county, and Antrim obviously is our county. And we set up that, actually it's coming up to its 10th anniversary. The Saffron Business Forum been a hugely successful networking organisation. We've probably most of the top businesses that are in Belfast and further afield in that network now. We've about 150, I think maybe 160 members. I sit in the committee along with I think about 9 or 10 of us. And what we do every year is we organise about 3 business breakfasts. We have a very sought after lunch in May that takes place. I'm not sure of the name of the hotel.
Crown Plaza.
The Crown Plaza, yeah. And yeah, we go there every May and we have a great day out. But it's all about networking with like-minded people and business people, and trying to do a bit of business but have a bit of crack at the same time. Yeah. It's not too formal. Funny, we were talking about it. We had a committee meeting last week where people have had to learn, when you come to one of our lunches, don't book any appointments in the afternoon. It's one of those type of lunches, and it's become renowned for that, and it's great to out and a lot of familiar faces, And
has sport influenced, your career and how you lead?
Probably, and from a team point of view, I've never, any sport that I've ever played has been part of a team. Yeah. So from that perspective, yes, trying to win something as a team is the same in business. You're trying to deliver something as a team. So yeah, it has to have had a read across in terms of what we've been doing.
And a question I've been asking everybody who's joined us so far on the podcast, and I'll leave you with this one, Dominic, is what advice would you give to somebody who is aspiring to step up into a senior leadership role?
Go for it. Absolutely, go for it. If you think you're right for it and you're ambitious enough, then don't let anything stop in your way. You can read all the books you want and do all the leadership courses that you want as well, but you have to absolutely go and grab it, and you'll learn on the job. Don't worry, don't be too nervous about it, just go for it, and if it's in you, it'll work out for you.
Great. Dominic, thank you very much for joining me.
No problem.
It's been a really good chat.
No problem.
Thank you.